Okay, good afternoon, members. We were scheduled to have two briefings today. First, from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. They're looking at proposed cuts in the annual budget, and we agreed to their request for a briefing on the 14th of May. We were to be briefed by the Department on the 2014-15 budget and savings delivery plans. The Department, however, sent a letter to the committee this afternoon at 12:44. What did it say? 1:45, 12:44 today, advising the briefing will not take place as the opening budget for 14-15 still remains under consideration. In your table packs at page 3, you'll find a copy of that correspondence. It advises the Department will be in contact in due course with regard to a date for briefing on financial matters, and this will cover opening budget, savings plans and June monitoring, and June monitoring is scheduled for next week. We have had apologies from Brenda Hale, Jimmy Spratt and Megan Fearon. No other notifications, we'll wait and see. Okay. On to page 5, members, a letter from the President of the European Economic and Social Committee just thanking us for hosting a lunch for them on the 3rd of April. Page 6, an invitation from the General Medical Council. They're holding an event on health and social care regulation. It's Wednesday the 11th at noon in the Long Gallery. Please respond directly if you wish to attend. Page 7, an invitation to attend the launch of Community Relations Week. That's Tuesday the 10th of June. It is at 11 o'clock at the MAC in Belfast City Centre. If you want to attend that one, would you let the committee office know, please? Page 8 is current invitations. Also, members, the 2014 Survey of Services is underway, and I've been asked to stress it's important that all members reflect on the services that are being provided by the Assembly Commission. So please do respond to the survey before the closing date, which is 6th of June. So item 3 next, the draft minutes of the meeting of the 14th of May begins at page 10 in your packs. Are we content to agree the draft minutes?
Great.
Great. Thank you. Matters arising, page 16, a response from the Assembly's Research and Information Service to the Department's comments on the research paper on financial transaction capital. The response suggests the committee may wish to consider seeking further information on SIB's conduit role when the sponsor body does not have the requisite legislative authority to enter into a financial transaction capital scheme. Seems reasonable that we pursue that line. Members content so to do?
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Page 21, then a response from the Victims and Survivors Service giving us further information following the briefing on the 7th of May. They've given us a copy of the Corporate Risk Register, a copy of the Implementation Plan for the Independent Assessment Report recommendations, and a copy of the Communications Plan for Scheme 6. If you go to it, members, starting on page 21, at page 23, we have the traffic lights. There are a lot of reds, I would point out, and some very noteworthy, I would have thought, narrative there. For example, with regard to mental health, VSS suspending mental health assessment from Wednesday the 11th of December 2013 due to a lack of capacity to deliver against rising demand. Further on, another red. The Client Service Division has currently 16 staff working various working patterns. 11 are engaged on a temporary or agency basis, 11 out of 16. Contract end period for many was 31st March 2014. Ongoing instability and lack of information not acceptable to many. And the service risks losing experienced people who've developed good relationships with clients and groups. And as you know, that's always a major criticism and frustration for victims, that they develop a relationship with an individual in an organisation, build the trust, and then that individual moves on. There's a lot to it, members. I'm wondering whether you'd want to put it on the agenda and come back and discuss it in detail next week.
Chair, I think we should.
Yeah? Okay.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Then page 56 of your pack, responses, first of all from Savia, then Contact Northern Ireland, and then WAVE to the committee's request for their assessment of how the support services are operating for victims who have attended the Acknowledgement Forum as part of Sir Anthony Hart's historical institutional abuse inquiry. And there are members' serious concerns being raised in these reports about the aftermath of individuals engaging. And again, it's I think a common theme with victims that you maybe develop mechanisms to cope with what you've been through, but when you go to something like an acknowledgement forum and you open up, you do need the right support at the right time from the right people. Otherwise, you've opened a Pandora's box, which is difficult to close. What I would suggest is the members wish to seek a briefing either from the department or from the inquiry chair, although I have to say I think the department is responsible for this provision of support services.
Department?
I think the department, yeah. Certainly in the first instance, yeah. We all agree it's a serious issue that we must look into.
Mm-hmm.
We've also had a request, members, which has come directly to myself from a support group asking to come and brief the committee. Now, I'll take your views on it, or I'll offer an opinion, whatever you prefer.
Chair, is it just the one group that's looking for it?
It's one specific group, George. So, in the absence of comment, what I would suggest is that if you're going to listen to one group, you should listen to them all. So perhaps the best first step is to engage with the department who are providing the support services, and bear in mind all the information that you've got in your pack, and the fact that we're now being made aware by people that there are, certainly on the face of it, serious issues. Okay, content? Okay. Page 86 is the list of outstanding correspondence. Page 90, correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel, giving us further information on outstanding post-project evaluations. Members, are you content to write to the department to seek comment on its outstanding PPEs? Thank you. Page 99 of your pack, correspondence from the Equality Coalition, highlighting its commissioned paper on sectarianism in Northern Ireland, time for a definition in law. A copy of that paper is included. In the absence of comment, I will take it as noted. Page 141 then, correspondence from the Northern Ireland Ombudsman, advising of a bid it's making to the department in the June monitoring round process for £105,500 for additional staff in relation to our NIPSO bill. Page 142, correspondence from the department advising that the First Minister and Deputy First Minister have reappointed Mr John Larkin QC as Attorney General. The reappointment commenced on the 24th of May and will terminate on the 30th of June 2016.
Could we inquire from FM and DFM if the terms of reappointment are precisely the same as the ones at the time of appointment, in terms of the
yes.
authority and role of the office?
Yes. All content? Thank you. Page 143 is a copy of a response from the Department to the Committee for Culture, Arts and Leisure with regard to their inquiry into the inclusion in the arts of working class communities. Page 151, copy correspondence from the Committee from the Environment to the Department regarding the Northern Ireland Rural Development Programme 2014 to 20. Members, you might recall we considered this correspondence previously when it was sent to us by RSPB. Page 156, copy of a response from the Department to the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment, advising that an official would be attending its event on energy efficiency on the 10th of June. Page 157, correspondence from the Business Office, advising that the Victims and Survivors Service annual report and accounts for 2012-13 have been laid in the Assembly. Okay, members, we go on to what is now going to be our only substantive briefing of the day. It's from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. The briefings in relation to correspondence the committee received from the Commission, advising that the Northern Ireland office had written to them to request an impact assessment showing would need to be done to accommodate an 11.15% reduction in the Commission's budget from the 2014-15 levels for 2015-16. At page 159 of your packs is a copy of the letter from the Human Rights Commission highlighting the issue, and then in your table papers at page 5 is a copy of the business plan for 2013-14 for the Human Rights Commission. And we're joined by David Russell, who's Deputy Director, Virginia McVeigh, who is Director, and by the Interim Chair, John Corey. And you are all very welcome. John, can I invite you to make some opening remarks, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson, and I thank the committee, yourself and the committee, for this opportunity to brief you on the matter of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission's budget. In given evidence, I must always state that the Commission does so pursuant to its statutory duty under Section 69(3) of the Northern Ireland Act to advise the Assembly of legislative and other measures which ought to be taken to protect human rights. In doing so, so I have to make that statement. In doing so, the Commission recalls this committee's particular remit relating to the scrutiny of such matters. Committee members will know that the Human Rights Commission was established under the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and then it was strengthened through an extension of its powers as a consequence of the St Andrews Agreement in 2006. The Commission is an important institution through which the political commitment to protect and vindicate the human rights of all in Northern Ireland can be evidenced. And that is further enhanced by the fact that the Commission is recognised as a national human rights institution with A status accreditation from the International Coordinating Committee of National Institutions for Promotion and Protection of Human Rights. And this status enables the Commission to represent Northern Ireland at the United Nations and to exercise speaking rights before United Nations human rights councils and treaty bodies. Now, this accreditation is important as it ensures that Northern Ireland is represented equally with the rest of the UK at the United Nations, and there is a unique arrangement whereby the Commission is brigaded together with the Equality and Human Rights Commission and the Scottish Human Rights Commission for this purpose. And it means that Northern Ireland has an equal voice in those fora at all times under the current situation. Committee members will also be aware that under the Northern Ireland Miscellaneous Provisions Act, the Commission's status was recategorised as a reserved matter. Now, if in the future there is devolution, as we envisage it, within the Commission certainly, this committee will then have a key role with the Commission. What has happened is that on the 29th of April, just past, the Commission's sponsor department, which is the Northern Ireland Office, requested the submission of an impact statement on how the Commission would implement an 11.15% reduction in its budget for the next financial year, 2015-16. The NIO stated that this 11.15% cut was a combination of the outcome of the UK Government's 2013 spending review, which called for a 10% cut, and then a further 1.15% cut from the Chancellor's autumn statement. Now, what we submit is that this proposed budget cut has to be considered against a number of key facts as follows. First, as a basic fact, the Commission's budget for 2014-15 is 1.341 million, or 1,341,000, and the proposed reduction would mean the next year's grant aid would be down to 1,258,000. However, that has to be taken along with the fact that this Northern Ireland Office proposal follows a reduction of 25% of the budget already imposed on the Commission over the last 4 years. And we submit that this is notably greater than the level of cuts imposed on bodies under devolution. Thirdly, the imposition of the budget cuts to date imposed by the Secretary of State has meant the Commission has faced considerable pressure. It now operates with a full-time chairperson or chief commissioner and 7 part-time commissioners, supported by 14 full-time staff. And as a consequence of the cuts that we have experienced, chairperson and members, to date, the Commission has had to prioritise its allocation of its own resources across its functions, and it's reached the point where our legal budget is down to just 37,000 for the current year, which in practice prevents the Commission from exercising its powers to their full extent as a guardian of human rights in Northern Ireland. And what we submit is that any further reduction in financial support for the Commission as a national human rights institution in a post-conflict environment risks a number of things. First, it risks the status of the Commission as recognised by the United Nations. Secondly, it risks our ability to fulfil the functions required of a national human rights institution. And thirdly, it risks our capacity to carry out our duties as set out in the Northern Ireland Act 1998. And I assure members of the committee that I do not state those risks lightly. I would like to add that certainly in my role as interim chair, both I and my colleague commissioners accept that we have responsibilities to ensure the institution operates efficiently within budget and to deliver value for public money. We believe that we have done so in ensuring that the Commission's work programme is maintained, and we have always sought to cooperate with successive budget cuts imposed by the Northern Ireland Office and the Secretary of State over the last number of years in recognition of the overall or general reduction that has taken place in public expenditure. However, the Commission is not a typical non-departmental public body, and indeed we would question the use of that description for the Commission. But we say the Commission's role is unique in the public structures within Northern Ireland. It is itself, as a Commission, a component, indeed a central component of the peace process, and we have a specific function of advising the Executive and the Assembly and acting as a bridge between civil society and the state, and to take actions to protect and promote the human rights of everyone living here. The Commission must also operate within internationally established structures of the United Nations Paris Principles, and furthermore, it is required to do so within both the framework of protections mechanisms that operate throughout the United Kingdom and on the island of Ireland. The United Nations have charged national human rights institutions and societies that are subject to or are emerging from violent conflicts with additional duties, and we submit there is a requirement on the operating mandate and levels of state support in such jurisdictions to take account of this increased demand. Our conclusion, faced with this call from the Northern Ireland Office, is that our capacity to fulfil our statutory functions and exercise our powers are significantly compromised. I want to also say that we have raised this repeatedly with Secretaries of State and Northern Ireland Office officials, and I have to say finally, that a further reduction in financial support would force the Commission to a point where we could not fulfil our statutory duties or effectively exercise our powers. That's the position that we face as a Commission, as a Human Rights Commission, and that's what I want to open with, Chairperson. And I thank you again for the opportunity to give this evidence to this committee, and my colleagues may wish to add any points, or collectively we would be pleased to answer questions that committee members have.
Yes, well, no, thank you, John. Maybe Virginia and David will chip in as we go along. And as you've said, your sponsor department is the Northern Ireland office. You are not devolved, so our relationship with you is not as it would be with, for example, the Equality Commission. But as you also make clear, the reason we should be engaged with you is that you have a statutory duty in terms of legislation under the Northern Ireland Act to advise us on all the legislation that comes out of this building. You're being asked to take another haircut, another financial haircut, and you're basically saying this time it's going to hurt your ability to do your job. That's effectively the bottom line here, yeah?
That's correct.
You've obviously put that point to the NIO. How has it been received?
Well, we, to meet public accountability requirements, Virginia McVeigh, as the accounting officer under the normal procedures, has responded to that request. We have conveyed to the Northern Ireland office largely the information that I have given in my statement to you. The response from the Northern Ireland office is to recall again for the impact assessment and indeed to indicate that if we have difficulties identifying how we can make the savings, the Northern Ireland office will help us to identify how we can make the savings. I have to say, it's not a view of the Commission, it's a personal view. I just got the feeling they weren't listening to us whenever we submitted the response to the call for an impact statement or the seriousness of the position.
How much would an impact assessment cost to put together, John, out of interest?
Well, an impact assessment is not clearly defined in terms of what is required in respect of an impact assessment. If you examine some of the government websites, you will get some literature about impact assessments, and they can have different meanings in different contexts. We will have to produce an impact assessment from within our own resources, largely, and it does take time. We have already had to spend a considerable amount of time and resources since the 29th of April in meeting and addressing what has been put to the Commission by way of proceeding. But colleagues may wish to add.
I think in terms of impact assessment, in a way you could say it wouldn't cost a great deal of money, and it's not rocket science to look at the bottom line and say there's nothing more to be cut in order to fulfil your statutory duties. And some of the impact can be identified by the response of the Joint Committee at Westminster on human rights and by the head of the European Network of Human Rights Institutions. So there are 41 national human rights institutions across Europe, and our sister agencies in England, or England and Wales and Scotland, share our concerns and understand that there are three particular features of Northern Ireland which in UN terms would be described as additional duties. One is the post-conflict setting, which is unique. The other is that we were designated a national preventive mechanism in relation to the Disability Convention, jointly with the Equality Commission, which was an additional duty for which we received no money. And the third is that in UN terms, we have what they call a quasi-jurisdictional function, which means that we take complaints and can be involved in legal action. And those are all seen as additional to the normal functioning of a national human rights institution. And under those Paris principles, the state is already charged with providing what's called adequate funding, and funding which will progressively ensure greater and greater protection and promotion of human rights within the jurisdiction. So you can see that what has happened is our duties have increased and the support from government has decreased.
There are two areas in John's opening remarks which I wanted to ask you about. The first was this notion that you now have to prioritise. In a sense, if it's strategic, of course, prioritising is a good thing. But if it's like being a kind of triage at the hospital where you're waiting and you keep getting bumped by people arriving with more serious issues, then obviously it is not. Is it the latter, where you're not doing this strategically, but you're having to say, well, actually, we can only do one of these two things, and this one is more important?
Well, maybe if I'd just make a comment on that. Can I go back, Chairperson, just to the previous question to make one point clear, in that this is not a knee-jerk reaction coming to this committee. In receipt of this letter from the Northern Ireland office, we recognised immediately this raises fundamental questions. And can I be clear that prior to receipt of this letter, and indeed not in any anticipation of receiving such a letter, I wrote to the Secretary of State on the 17th of April requesting a meeting on a range of issues, and included in that was our concerns about the current budget before this letter ever arrived. To date I have received a very short response from the Secretary of State indicating that a meeting would be arranged, and I received that on or around the 14th of May or 15th of May, but the meeting hasn't been arranged yet. Just want to make it clear that we will pursue that path in any case. In relation to your question about, are we like triage? Are we like the Accident and Emergency Service in terms of trying to cope? The Commission unquestionably has faced a significant reduction in budget over 4 years, which means that the Commission is unable to do all that it would wish to do. And we do not feel that we have adequate funding as it currently stands. However, we do have a strategic plan in place, which I think we presented to this committee previously. We have clear objectives and desired outcomes to work to. Our capacity to deliver on that strategic plan will be significantly affected by an 11.15% budget cut. And in fact, we would have a duty, if we were faced with this, to inform all stakeholders that we could not meet our strategic plan. We would have that duty.
Well, something that may be illustrative to help was I looked back, and in 2003, at the request of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Bryce Dixon, the then Chief Commissioner, had prepared a submission for a book on national human rights institutions. And when he was referring to Northern Ireland, he had referred to the budget back in 2001-2002. And he had said out of that budget, the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission had been able to set aside only £100,000 to discharge its duties in relation to its legal function. And in that book, he had said that that was insufficient, not least because we worked in a common law jurisdiction, which meant that you may have to bear the costs of the other side. And at that time, it was accepted by the UN that there were difficulties around a budget like that in our jurisdiction with the duties that we had. Practically this year, we have had to cut that budget to £37,000.
Well, that was the second area I wanted to come to, Virginia, because in my mind, I suppose the three key functions for your body is to sort of analyse and advise on the one hand, secondly, educate and promote awareness, but thirdly, get the sleeves rolled up and get into investigations, of which legal action would be a key arm. £37,000. Well, we have a qualified lawyer in the room who I'm sure could offer an opinion better than I, but I suspect 37,000 doesn't go a long way in the legal profession.
No. Doesn't buy much, no.
So we continue with our investigation. So our investigative function and the legal function are not entirely coterminous, but as you say, they can necessarily be engaged with one another.
So if I walked through your door tomorrow morning and said, you know, I work somewhere with another 99 people and here is the issue, and you were convinced this was a very serious, gross human rights issue that needed to be taken to court to be solved, it's very unlikely.
Well, we have to be, and we have been creative, and sometimes what works to your advantage is how slowly the wheels will grind.
Right.
And it is possible to begin something and see how it will pan out. We have continued with our legal clinics and we're able to find the early resolutions. But yes, there is a concern about managing that risk, and however creative you are, you have to acknowledge at the outset that that's a huge hurdle to overcome.
Okay. Alex Maskey. Alex Atwood. Sorry, Alex.
You have to excuse me, I have to leave to go to another meeting, so I appreciate getting in now. So, like, obviously this is a very serious situation. If you go back to the Good Friday Agreement, one of the reasons why the structures were created around policing, criminal justice, human rights and equality was because during the worst year...
I think it is...
I'm sorry. Somehow Nick Clegg got into the room there. Sorry. So if you look at those structures that were created, they were created because during the years of conflict, the conflict revolved around issues of law, order, justice and rights. That's not my words, they're actually the words of Frank Wright, the former academic who's now deceased at Queen's, where he said that national conflicts, when they're fully developed, revolve around issues of law, order, justice and rights. And that's why the Good Friday Agreement was structured to deal with issues of law, order, justice and rights, including the creation of the Human Rights Commission. And therefore, the practice or the approach of the British government to run that down raises issues, in my view, in terms of the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement and the guardian role that the two governments have in respect to the Good Friday Agreement, including respect of the issue of rights and the maintenance of rights. So my own view is that it should be an issue that should be also raised with the Irish government. I think you said you've done that, given their responsibilities with respect to the Good Friday Agreement. My own view is that this committee should be advising all the committees. If you haven't written to all the committees, we should be writing to all the committees of the Assembly, because you have a responsibility to all departments and to all committees as a consequence, if you like, so that we raise the issue there, and with FM and DFM. Because if you are not able to fulfil your statutory function, and that includes the function of giving advice to government and to ministers or the executive or whoever it might be, then a fundamental requirement of good government and good law is compromised. And as a consequence, I think this should be a matter that is escalated very significantly in order to ensure it doesn't arise. But my question is this. Are you aware if the British government consulted with any ministers here in respect of what they're now proposing? Because if they fail to consult with anybody here, it A, reveals a high-handed attitude, B, reveals probably some people don't understand the relationship you have with us. And if there hasn't been proper consultation or any consultation with relevant ministers here or relevant departments here, then I think we should be saying to the Secretary of State, and I'll certainly say to her at a meeting that we're having at 3 o'clock, you have to suspend anything you're doing, given your failure even to consult with relevant ministers to whom you give relevant advice when requested. So are you aware of any consultations with anybody here?
The answer I have to give to that is no. The communication has come from civil servants in the Northern Ireland office to the Commission. The communication is straightforward. As I indicated in my opening statement, it refers to the Government Spending Review and the Chancellor's Autumn Statement. It refers to the fact that the Treasury has called for government departments all to contribute to this reduction and their arm's length bodies to be included in the net. The Northern Ireland Office has also stated to us that it has no more room itself to accommodate this budget reduction within its own department, and hence it has now contacted its arm's length bodies, and we are one of those arm's length bodies, and that's the position we have been placed in. As I say, what we as a Commission are saying is that this compromises the Commission's ability to carry out its statutory functions and potentially compromises our position as a national human rights institution.
Can I add that you raise a key point, and it has it was played out to some extent in the passage of the Miscellaneous Provisions Bill itself and the interventions of the likes of Lord Alderdice around the engagement process and how important that is in Northern Ireland. And I have asked the NIO about what its process of engagement is overall on this, but we'll continue with that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Alex Massey.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. In a way, it's just a follow-on from the from Alex Alwood there. That I mean, suppose just to put it very, very succinctly, what you're basically saying is if your Commission has this 11 point whatever it is imposed on you, then you will not be able to deliver on your statutory obligation. Just technically, when would that start to kick in? I know you mentioned it early on, but.
Well, I think that I would emphasise that we consider we are already at the bottom line as a Commission in being able to discharge our responsibilities as a human rights institution. We're already there. The NIO proposal would mean that the budget for 2015-16, that is from April 2015, for that next financial year, would be reduced by this further 11.15%. And what we're saying clearly is that compromises the Commission. And I outlined in relation to our statutory functions, to our capacity to provide timely advice to this Assembly and to its committees, our capacity to assist people who consider their human rights have been violated and require legal assistance. And I suppose it's also relevant to point out that part of the Human Rights Commission's obligations under law is to have in place the joint committee with the Irish Human Rights Commission and to work jointly with that commission in terms of addressing human rights issues that are relevant to be considered on an all-island basis for the future of both parts of this island. And again, we are saying this budget cut compromises our ability to do that. In fact, we're already compromised in relation to that work.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that, because well, certainly I share the view that the Commission, there's an attempt to run the thing down, but that's been ongoing for a number of years, and I'm convinced of that. I do believe, and I think in previous evidence sessions the Commission has sat here and we've discussed around the kind of additional or extra engagement you'd wish to have with the Executive, because clearly, I mean, we'll all want to follow up with the British Secretary of State and so on, indeed both governments, but in terms of your own engagement with the executive parties, can you give us an indication, has that engagement been underway? Has it been successful? What kind of a hearing are you getting? I mean, because I just believe that obviously you're an NIO kind of sponsored body at this moment in time, but your relationship with us is critical. And I'm not satisfied, and this is not from your fault, but I'm not satisfied that the engagement with the Executive and yourselves has been as good and as qualitative as good as it should have been. And I think we've discussed some of the issues in that in the previous year. So, have you any sense, you may not be able to answer this, but if you are, I think I'd like an understanding. Have you been discussing this with the Executive if so, is there any response, or you may not be able to say the answer to that, and that's not a trick question. I'm just trying to see.
Yeah.
As I say, your role obviously is very critically important to us and the work that we have responsibility for, and I do think it is very timely and appreciate you coming here to make your argument. I actually just find it's so unacceptable the way in which it is being run down, and I believe it, as I said earlier on, it is. And I think this would be a very, very serious and retrograde step. But I'd like to know some flavour of your engagement with the executive, if you're able to do that.
Well, I'll just state some facts in relation to that. On receipt of this request from the NIO and recognising the seriousness of the position, we as a Commission have made contact with all parties that we considered needed to be advised. And indeed, where we considered we had a duty as a national human rights institution to so advise those parties. And we considered those were all political parties in the Northern Ireland Executive and who were party to the Good Friday Agreement. We have engaged with the Joint Human Rights Committee at Westminster, and we have engaged with the other human rights commissions as well as European human rights institutions because we have to discharge our obligations as a human rights institution. We have met to date with representatives of all of the parties that we have contacted. We are still trying to arrange a meeting with the Democratic Unionist Party.
We've had a meeting with the Democratic Unions and awaiting the Green Party and NI21.
Okay. So we have engaged with all.
Thank you.
Leslie Creed.
Good afternoon. Just to get a handle on the figures, from your letter, I'm just extrapolating here, is it about 1.4 million?
Our current budget is
1.3.
Is 1.34 million. The impact of an 11.15% reduction is the sum of 156,000. Now, in the great scheme of public expenditure, I don't know how many 0 points that represents in terms of a percentage of overall public expenditure. And on the one hand, it could seem to someone looking at it, that's a very small amount. Why does that cause a difficulty?
It's not a single amount, it's the cumulative effect of
It's the
several
cumulative
cuts.
effect, but for an organisation with a budget of 1.34 million, a reduction of 156,000 is very significant and has an immediate and direct impact against the background where we have already literally pared the organisation to the bone.
Okay, so the comprehensive spending review, 10%, have you checked to make sure that was applied in budgets across the water with your contemporaries?
If you refer to our contemporary, well, an obvious contemporary is the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And yes, we have actually engaged in discussions with the Equality and Human Rights Commission. We have explored with their chairperson and their chief executive the relevance of making comparisons in the two organisations' budgets. And it is correct that the Equality and Human Rights Commission's budget was reduced, but there are a number of differing factors relating to the Equality and Human Rights Commission in Britain. For example, it has gone through a process of merger, which the reductions in budget were part of the outworking of that merger. But in addition, as they have pointed out to us, while the Equality and Human Rights Commission's budget was reduced, some of the services that they formerly undertook have now moved to other parts of government. So the public expenditure is still being used to fund the service. It may not be with the Equality and Human Rights Commission anymore.
Yeah, but I'm aware of that actually, but that then surely must give you a template that you can use as part of your impact assessment. The fact that when you're comparing like with like, there is a significant change by virtue of the change of functions. So that obviously would be a useful thing to do. The other point that occurs to me, the Chancellor's autumn statement also brought money with it. You haven't heard anything about that?
No, it hasn't brought it our way.
So again, useful, it is there. So I think it is important that you use all the ammunition that you have to make sure. The other thought occurred to me was that when you have your impact assessment complete, obviously you'll have the budget headings, you can then suggest various playing around with the numbers, a 5% here, a 3%, whatever you want to do. Or you possibly could say to the Secretary of State, well, look, you tell us what you want to cut out.
Well, I think the latter point raises real difficulty, because the Secretary of State cannot tell a national human rights institution how it should spend its money.
No, but that
but
you take my point. You take my point. Yeah.
Allow my colleagues to comment.
Just on the budget, I think committee members need to know if the current proposal is imposed upon the Commission in real terms, allowing for inflation, the Commission's budget will be 60% of what it was in its very first year of full operations in 2000-2001. That was before the Commission gained its status as an A status National Human Rights Institution following the St Andrews Agreement in 2006. Our powers were enhanced in 2008. That was at the point at which we became accredited at the UN as A status, and that was the same point at which the Commission's budget was at its maximum. Since 2008 then, the Commission's budget has been reduced significantly, to the point where if we take this cut, as I said, we'll be back to 60% in real terms of the operating budget, albeit with the extended powers and duties required by the UN of an NHRI of our status. So when you talk about budget headings and where might cuts be taken potentially, the compare and contrast is only valuable up to a very small point.
No, I take your point, and it is historic, of course, at this stage. I mean, have you, for example, complained about other cuts through the years?
Yes,
You know,
we
so I
have.
think that's important. But whilst those are material facts that you're making, nevertheless, we are where we are today, and you've got to really fight the corner on you know, this now. There's no more fat left. You know, you're cutting into the bone.
It may be of interest in terms of comparators. We've done exactly that, and we met with Baroness Honora O'Neill and Mark Hammond, who's the Chief Executive of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. In terms of comparisons, it's tricky because they began with 500 staff and a budget of 70 million. So it's a bit like apples and pears to try and compare, and the context is so vastly different in terms of the way we
The
do
scale
it.
is, but the functions, I guess, are similar.
They're similar, but because of the post-conflict and Belfast Good Friday obligations in relation to the work with the Irish Commission, they are quite different in some respects. What's interesting to note in terms of the seriousness of the situation is that Baroness Honora O'Neill herself has given evidence that she is concerned that the cuts are so drastic in terms of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission that it could impact the group of UK institutions, and she described it as the coming down of the House of Cards. That's how drastic she regards the cuts in terms of being able to perform any function, to take money entirely out of one function in order to prop up others in the way that you have described is not possible and doesn't serve the public interest, can't provide value for money because it's not providing quality service.
Just, another point as well, which John had said in his opening statement, was regards to the Miscellaneous Provisions Act and the fact that the Commission's status has changed in the past 12 months from an accepted matter to a reserved matter, which obviously paves the way at some future point for devolution. When devolution occurs, whenever it's seen appropriate by both the executive here and the UK government to devolve, obviously the block grant will have to be negotiated for the Commission. And as the Commission's budget gets increasingly shrunk, the leverage with regard to us operating effectively when it becomes the responsibility of the devolved administration is going to be notably reduced.
That hadn't escaped me.
And that is a significant concern for ourselves, particularly at a time when devolution has increasingly embedded itself, and rightly and properly the demands upon the Commission from the administration here have been increasing. We are already in a position where our advice function is stretched to the limit. We have had to go back to government departments on significant public consultations and asked for extensions, for example, in order to fulfil our statutory requirements.
Thank you.
George Roberts.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to the team as well. My question would be around where you've had to implement the cuts. For example, is it staff that you've had to lay off, or has it come to that yet? And how many staff would be affected, to work efficiently?
At our peak, when David had referred to the peak funding and the securing of the A status, we had 28 staff. And when the Commission began, it had 10 part-time commissioners. And we are now down to the 13 and the 7, plus a Chief Commissioner that John referred to earlier. The 25% cuts over 4 years, I had to prepare a plan for the NIO. And it moved us through what became 3 tranches of redundancies, as well as efficiency savings across the board. Yes, it did already have an impact on staff, and that's partly why we're before you today. We understand that we have a duty, as recognised by the UN system, to work within what's happening with the state economy. And then there comes a point. And there is no doubt, as you have looked at welfare reform, the UN itself has recognised that one of the concerns in a period of economic downturn is when the vulnerable people become even more vulnerable and marginalised, and the protection and promotion of human rights becomes a priority issue. So yes, we have moved through all of those cuts to try and ensure value for money and effectiveness and efficiency, and that's where all of those cuts in terms of looking at the budget headings have come across all.
Has all the cuts been locally?
Well, we only have one office, although
Yeah.
we provide clinics across Northern Ireland and have a project in Derry, Londonderry. The offices are based in Belfast.
Thanks.
Alex, you want to follow
I
up?
mean, it's a final question, but it's important. I think that, clearly, again, I think you both, all have alluded to the role that you have, the critically important role you have in terms of the institutions here. And whilst we're obviously a statutory and scrutiny committee, and you've already explained, you've met virtually all of the parties. Have you asked to meet the executive yet, as in OFM, DFM, or have you met them? Or because clearly, if I was in OFM, DFM, I would think I would need the resources that you have. So, instinctively, I would think you'd want to be supported. You're asking for. I'm just wondering, is that support there?
Yeah, we haven't made a formal request to the executive as such, and I recognise the point you're making. The executive is also the responsible government within Northern Ireland, and that they equally should be aware of it. I might retort that they haven't met us either, but that's a different point. So it is.
Well, no, I think in fairness, your sponsor department is the NIO.
Yes, and I accept that, and that is a further point. Really, the Northern Ireland office is the current sponsor department. But as I did say, we have met with the executive parties, and we contacted all the executive parties immediately. This issue was raised with us.
Only make that point, Chair, because the executive here, which we have responsibility for.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Well,
thank you.
Yes, Virginia, David, and John. Thank you very much indeed. I think that has been very informative and useful for us as a committee, and we will now decide on, and there will be, I would predict, a course of action which we will undertake to take this matter further.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Thank you. All the best.
So, members, Alex Atwood put 2 proposals open to suggestion. He was suggesting we write to all the other statutory committees to make them aware, I think was his suggestion. And the other thing is writing to OFM, DFM to ask for their assessment of the impact of a reduction in service as a consequence of the reduction in budget.
Well, I would actually go further and ask that the OFM, DFM meets the Human Rights Commission to discuss this as a matter of urgency. I mean, I think it's... We've heard presentations previously from the Commission, and they've actually been clear that they would have preferred to have had a better engagement. I'm paraphrasing, so I'll stand to be corrected, but I get clear sense from them that there were times that they would have wanted to have a better engagement with MDFM. And I think it's inherently important now that, given what we've been told, not all the parties, I personally speaking, I would be wanting to propose that we write to MDFM and ask him to meet the Human Rights Committee as part of urgency. I'm not on anybody's side here, and we could get a letter back next week telling us their assessment is haven't agreed one. We haven't got a presentation here today on the budget because somebody doesn't agree. And exactly, I mean, I'm just making in our party, no problem with the presentation coming here today on the budget, but others do. So
I just wonder what the protocols are for
I think that's the
engaging.
issue. There are protocols as well. I don't understand where Alex is coming from. There are protocols in it, and the thing that cautions me here is that the NIO have not yet replied.
Could I suggest, Alex, because I think there are protocols that we're not right across. We all agree we want to write to the department, yeah?
Yeah.
To me, one of the very telling stats was that the budget's 60, if this goes through, the budget drops to 60% of what it was in 2000, 2001. And the consequences are a reduction in their inability to perform their statutory duties. Ask if the department is aware and what action it is taking.
I understand, but the problem that I have here is the time's not on anybody's side. I have met all the parties. I don't know what the response has been from all of the parties, so the parties are all aware of it. Now, given the very important role that the Human Rights Commission has in respect of these institutions, I just think it's not really acceptable to DFM wouldn't have met them. I don't see what's anti-protocol about that.
Well, there may be a protocol because the
I mean, we
sponsor...
shouldn't. I personally speaking, I don't want to sit here wasting my time thinking, is there a protocol? I don't care if there's a protocol or not. I think that they should be meeting them.
Well, I'm reluctant to put my signature to a letter where, you know, we should know better, effectively, if there is a protocol. So, I mean, I'm happy to write to the department and ask if they're aware and what their position is
I think that's
with regard.
the opening way, yeah. And it is next year's budget anyway, it's not this year's budget. It's the year after.
I mean, if people are arguing against doing that, I mean, at the very least, we need to have a letter going to with the MDFM expressing our concern.
No,
Because if a body comes here, it doesn't matter who they are, they come here and tell us that they're not going to be able to perform their
That's
statutory.
not arguing that. No,
That's fine.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Let
so we
it
incorporate our
from the
concern.
committee. George, yes, we write to the department and say we've had the briefing, we're very concerned to hear that the budget's going to be, the proposal is it drops to 60% of what it was in 2000, 2001, and that the implications are that they will not be able to carry out their full suite of statutory duties. And is the department aware of this, and what's its assessment, and above all, what is the department prepared to do?
Yeah, and we're expressing our
Address this.
concern. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a first shot.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So we now go to agenda item 7, which is a briefing on the budget for 2014-15 and savings deliveries plans. We now go to agenda item 8. You missed that, Alex. They cancelled it at 1:45.
No, I just made the point, Chairman. In my understanding, I checked it earlier, from the DFM side, they were quite prepared to put the paper, but the FM side were not content with the paper. So I'm just making that to the record.
We had a briefing from
George?
officials this morning.
Do you want to say anything?
No.
Oh, sorry. You have to,
Yes, we had a briefing this morning from officials.
the Committee for the Finance Personnel
Yeah.
had a briefing. On
Mind you, it
these-
wasn't much of a briefing, let me say, but it was a briefing. There were real people sitting down there.
So what I keep out
Okay.
a minute.
Next.
Did that include this department's budget?
It was really overview, but particularly our own department. But the real stumbling block is that they're hiding behind the June monitoring round, which is imminent. And it's really like all those little, you know, the little egg cup things where you put something under one, you say, right, where is it? Guess what you did. So There'll not be anything really firm coming out until after June monitoring, which is, I think it's next week.
Closing date's the 5th of June.
So that, I would guess is the reason.
Closing date's the 5th of June. They're offering to brief us on the 4th of June. So you think they're going to send Tommy Cooper? Copy a cup, do you? Agenda item 8 is the draft forward work programme at page 168 of your packs. We have officials who are committed to providing a briefing on the Good Relations Indicators consultation on the 11th of June. We have not yet, however, received word on whether the First Minister and Deputy First Minister will be attending next week's meeting, as has been scheduled in the forward work programme for some time. In the absence of comment on that, any other business? If not, members, we have a change in structure. This is Shona's last meeting. As clerk.
All together now.
Yes. But we don't lose her entirely. In the same way when Alan Hicks stood down as committee clerk, we didn't lose him because he went to work on the Public Service Ombudsman's Bill and stayed with us. Shona, of course, will stay engaged with us as the European officer. What is the title?
TBC.
TBC was that?
EU Affairs.
Well,
something.
European Affairs Liaison Officer. And on a weekly basis, Karen Jardine, who is in the corner, will be joining us. And then in another change in structure, we're going to have a kind of Uber clerk. Mr. McAteer from Finance and Personnel, who Leslie will know, won't be joining us every week, but he's going to take the kind of strategic view, which I think will be useful, because no doubt you kept getting dragged back into daily paperwork. Don't comment. So anyway, thank you very, very much indeed on behalf of the committee for everything you've done for us. And we look forward to working with you, Karen. So members, the next meeting is Wednesday the 4th, 2 p.m. here in room 30. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
30.